individual examples, including embryology. That way, both of our audiences will know, where we stand on the issues.
Yeah.
How does that sound?
That sounds fine.
All right. So what I wanted to say, first and foremost, is that and I think maybe you'll agree with me here, we don't say that science is incorrigible or that it produces eternal sets of truth. And we know that the scientific method is based on falsification, as Karl Popper and others have stipulated. And as such, there can be change in science, even that which is referred to as scientific fact. We know that Thomas Kuhn wrote a book called The Structures of Scientific Revolution,
Yep.
which talks about what he refers to as paradigm shift.
Yeah, I've got it.
You've got that book?
Got that book.
So me and you, I think, both agree that we shouldn't be using science as a yardstick for truth in an absolute sense, because maybe me and you will agree that science is itself not a perfect or eternal, incorrigible enterprise. Would you agree with that?
Can I reply?
Yes, of course.
So, I agree with the general thesis laid out by Mohammed. I agree with it. However, there are relative truths within greater paradigms that we can establish as certain. Things that we have no reason to indicate, because until there is a greater degree of observational tool, as well as the fact that technology itself will reach a limit in terms of what observations it can make, will mean that there is a conclusivity to certain observations. Certain observations are not all like speculative physics, like the multiverse and discussions about the Big Bang and questions about what gravity is.
Yeah.
Some things are actually indisputable descriptions of the material world, such as the chemical compound of water, H2O.
All right, so in a sense, I kind of do agree with you, but I'd like to kind of couch my language in more specific and sophisticated terminology.
Go on.
I think you're right to say that there is different epistemic weights to different observations that one can have scientifically.
Yeah.
But I would use it on a scale of probability. So
Which is exactly what science does.
Yeah, exactly. So for instance, like if I say that men have XY chromosomes and women have XX chromosomes, that to me seems a more certain fact than string theory, for instance, because string theory is new. It hasn't had the same kind of peer-reviewed exposure as has the biological understanding of XY versus XX.
Yeah, I think me and you have got enough grasp of the scientific method to now move the conversation forward.
So so that's good. So what we're saying is effectively, we agree on the fact that science is not an eternal truth, but that certain things are probabilistically more possible than others.
Yes, and that some observations we have no grounds to dispute. Would you agree with that? There's certain observations within science.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right, and
so for instance, like the XY and XX.
Well, I mean, it's a bit more complicated than that, because there's XXY and there's
Right.
XYY.
No, but yeah. These are additions rather than replacements for Mark. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
So they work within a certain paradigm.
Right.
So now, let me lay out my case.
Yeah.
Because I'm the prosecutor in this discussion.
Now we are both prosecutors and we're both defendants.
Right. Well, so let me lay out
we talked about a fact that
yeah.
we're going to bring both of the books.
Yes, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fine. So in terms of the standard, so I'm going to lay out my case. In terms of the standard that the Quran lays out for itself, it says in Surah 482, you probably know it off the top of your head. Yes. What does it say?
لو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا. If it was from other than God, they would have found in it many inconsistencies.
Yeah, exactly. Many. Yeah, and I'll just read it in the translation that we've got here as well.
Yes, sir.
So just to make sure that there's no dispute. 482. Do they not consider the Quran carefully?
Yes.
Had it been from other than Allah, they would surely have found therein many a contradiction. Now, many a contradiction can be internal contradictions, or it can be external contradictions. Agreed?
Yes.
So, Muslims have marshalled, and I accuse the dawah, those who are doing dawah, I accuse them of lying deliberately. Because they claim and I'm going to demonstrate that it's false. The Quran,
When you say they, let's be clear here.
the da'i, the ones
No,
doing
but
dawah.
let's be very specific because what
People like Zakir Naik,
Okay,
people
fine.
like Adnan Rashid, people like.
So you're talking
I've given you some examples. Shabi
No, but
Ali.
are you talking about Zakir Naik or are you talking because you have to understand something. I think it's very important to realize that we don't all have the same view when it comes to this.
I agree.
So it's not. I don't think it's very clever to generalize the
Well,
da'is in that
I
sense.
tried to be specific. I did say the da'i, those doing dawah.
Some.
And I gave examples
Well,
of the
right,
kind
yeah,
of people that I'm talking
that's
about.
why I just had to interrupt to make sure that that kind of specificity was ensured.
Okay, so
ahead.
we've clarified that. So now, in terms of the argument,
You like that?
yeah, in terms of the argument, yeah, no, it's totally fine.
He said it's totally fine.
In terms of the argument,
It's fine.
in terms of the argument,
Yes, sir.
Muslims make the argument that the Quran accurately describes embryology. That's what they say.
Yeah.
Now, I've qualified that, so when I say Muslims, I'm speaking about certain kinds of Muslims, like Adnan Rashid, like Zakir Naik,
Right.
like Shabi Ali. Not
Right.
every Muslim, I fully appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, it is fair, therefore, for me to test that argument.
Of course.
Right, so when I look at the description in the Quran,
Yeah.
and I'm going to read it to you, I'm going to ask you to just qualify for me what you think the stages are that are being described. So if we go to Surah 23:12,
Yeah, I got it.
yeah. So 12 to 14, if you want to recite that while I'm getting out the English.
No, it's fine. You can just go ahead.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but just before I do recite it, if you want me to, there are two It's not just 23 which talks
I
about
know.
stages. There's 22 as well.
Yeah, I've got
Surah
that.
Al-Hajj.
I've got that.
Yeah. So what? Do you want me to go through all the stages?
No. I'm going to read it, and when you hear a stage, I want you to stop me, interrupt me, and say this is a stage. Is that fair? So that everyone can hear the case being made out. Right? So, and indeed we created man out of an extract of clay. Thereafter we made him as a nutfa, thank you, in a safe lodging. Then we made the nutfa into a cloth. Then into a clot. Then we made the clot into a little lump of flesh.
Yeah.
Then we made out of that little lump of flesh bones. Then we clothed the bones with flesh,
Yeah.
and then we brought it forth as another creation.
Yeah.
So how many stages did you hear there?
In this part, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ. So number one, tin.
What, sorry?
So the clay or mud.
So clay, yep.
All right, and then you have ثم جعلناه نطفة في قرار مكين. We made him into a nutfa in a safe lodging. So nutfa.
Nutfa.
ثم
It's the same
جعلنا
lodging. It's the safe lodging.
ثم خلقنا النطفة علقة فخلقنا العلقة مضغة فخلقنا مضغة عظاما فكسونا العظام لحما ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين.
So you hear 3 stages.
No. So no. You got. So let's go with nutfa.
Yeah.
We're talking about embryology in particular, right? So if you have nutfa,
Yeah.
then you have mudgha.
Which is?
Mudgha is a lump.
Yep.
And by the way, on this.
No. We're just going through the stages. Man.
But I have to. No, I'm doing it, but you have to let me say what it is. Yeah. In chapter 22, it says about mudgha.
Yep.
مخلقة وغير مخلقة. So it's partly formed and partly unformed.
Yeah.
And then so after mudgha you have alaqa, which is a clot, and then after alaqa you have idam, which is bones. Yeah. And then you have after that flesh.
Okay.
So
right.
5.
Now, again, just like the Muslim brother before him, without any prompting from me, no prompting from me at all, Mohammed said you have bones, then flesh.
Yeah.
So that's 2 Muslims independently, and Hijab's an experienced debater who said bones and then flesh.
That's right.
Now, guys, it is a simple fact of embryology, and you can all go and Google it right now. Bones do not. Now, notice the interruptions.
Guys, let him make his claim, please. Let him make his
There we
claim.
go. Bye, Mansour. Bye, Mansour. Bye,
Bye,
Mansour. Mansour, do you not think that hijab's big enough to stick up for himself?
Yeah, we know
I don't think hijab needs your help.
Keep going.
But if you want to come into debate, stand there.
No, I can't.
Just stand here.
Can you continue? Why are you off? No, I'm going to correct him every now and then. Carry on.
Right. So, guys, I challenge you now to go away and research it yourself. No embryologist argues that bones become flesh. Not anyone that is respectable. Except Mansour. Sadly, this is why I have to raise my voice. I didn't want to, but I'm going to have to. I'm going to have to raise my voice because of Mansour. It's a shame because me and Hijab were having a nice conversation. Until Mansour turned up. So I'm not, all you're doing is delaying the argument. I'm still going to say my point, Mansour. I'm waiting for him to shut up. I'm waiting for him to shut up.
Made your point.
I haven't finished my point. I haven't made my point.
All right, guys, be quiet, please. Let him finish his point because we have nothing to hide here. We have nothing to hide here. Let him finish his point. He said there's no references. We're gonna just explore that.
So the fact of the matter is, without any prompting from me, Hijab has said bones then flesh.
Yes.
And it is a fact, ladies and gentlemen. A fact that you can check for yourselves that bones and flesh grow together. JC, focus.
No, they don't.
Okay? They grow together. They grow at the same time.
Guys, calm down.
They grow at the same time.
Guys, calm down.
From the mesoderm.
Guys, calm down. Yes,
So
complete.
when the Quran says that bones grow with flesh, it's wrong for two reasons.
Yes, go ahead.
Firstly, there is no ossification at this point. It's cartilage. It's not bone.
That's false.
Ossification comes later.
That's actually false.
Comes later. And it isn't that the bones grow independently from the flesh.
No, by the way,
they grow together. Why are you interrupting? They grow together, and this is why the Quran is wrong, because it stages it, and he admitted it.
Fine.
Bones then flesh. Your response?
Okay. He said there's no ossification. Ossification is when bone forms, and this is also referred to as osteogenesis, okay? He also said bones then flesh. Now let's be very clear. The word bones in Arabic is aidam. Now the word in the ayah was aidam. The word aidam in the Arabic language includes cartilage, by the way. How do we know that? If you look at the Arabic lexicons, and I can give you the names of them if you like.
I'd like you to pull it up.
Yeah, it's Lisan al-Arab from Ibn Manzur.
Yeah, no, can you pull it up? Can we see it?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, let's pull it up.
So for example, I'll read it exactly as it says in the lexicon, right? Yeah. So basically this is what Ibn Manzur says in his lexicon.
Just quoting the Arabic, let's see if you understand.
Well, so Al-Fayruz Abadi mentions. Al-Fayruz Abadi is another Arabic lexicon, okay? Al-Khudruf, and this is, he died 817 Hijri. Al-Khudruf wal-Khudruf kullu azmin. Guys, please, I'm quoting it. I'm quoting it by the word. So there's no one here gonna say, get me a reference. I'm quoting it. He says, Al-Khudruf kullu azmin rakhsin yu'kalu wa huwa marin al-unfi wa نغض الكتف ورؤوس الأصنع. Yeah, and this is in, I'll tell you exactly where it is. It is in Fayruz Abadi's Qamus al-Muhit, volume 1, page 840. Any issues?
So yes, I have an issue.
Okay, please, let me finish.
Yeah, I'll let you finish, but I have an issue.
Now that we have established, have we not, with references, have we not, that al-ghudruf, which is cartilage, is bone and cartilage can be used synonymously. He said that ossification doesn't happen. That's absolutely absurd.
No, I didn't say that.
No, he did say at this point, he did say that.
He didn't say that.
He said, no, he's making scientific mistakes. He said there's no reference as well.
Okay.
All right, so, excuse me. He said, guy, calm down, because he's saying that there's no reference. I've got a book called The Fundamentals of Human Embryology. Be quiet, please. The Fundamentals of Human Embryology.
Printed where, please?
Okay, I'll tell you. Page 148, this is a book that is used by biologists in their first or second year. And this is also a book that is used by medical students and others. It's a book called The Fundamentals of Human Embryology.
Okay. We'll look at it.
It might be Oxford University Press. I'm not going to give you like a full bibliography. Now you're being a bit ridiculous.
Fair enough.
Now, page 148.
I'll give you that one.
All right, look, page 148. Listen to what it said. Soon after the cartilaginous models of the bones have been established, the myogenic cells, which have now become myoblasts, aggregate to form muscle masses on the ventral and dorsal aspects of the limbs. These muscle masses in the relevant compartments form the flexors and extensors of the joints. Rotator muscles are also formed so that flexors and pronatators are related and extenders are and supinators are related. Now this is very, very clear to me, and it's actually a reference.
Can I
No,
reply,
let me just finish.
okay.
No, please. When somebody is a layman when it comes to science, and is a layman when it comes to philosophy, and is a layman when it comes to Islamic theology, and is a layman when it comes to the Arabic language, has the audacity to come and stand. Wait, excuse me. Calm down. Has the audacity to come in front of. No. Let me finish. Has the audacity to come in front of me, making two false claims. The first of which is that the Quran has said.
Hijab. Come on.
Let me finish.
Just going at this point.
He said it on the camera. He said it on the camera. He said it on the camera,
Yeah.
and this is at the age of technology.
Yeah.
He said ossification doesn't happen at this stage. That's false. That is false. Osteogenesis.
He didn't say that.
Well, we can rewind it.
Okay.
We can rewind it.
Hijab, let me
Excuse me. Ossification does take place by the admission of the authorities, and that's what people are using in universities all across this country. Number two.
No.
Number two. Excuse me. Let me finish. I gave you a reference.
Let him finish. So
Number two, therefore.
Why when you're saying that to Mansour?
Number two.
You're going on too long,
Let
Hijab.
him talk though. This is not a fair argument.
Now,
This is why we need to do it time.
No.
This is why we need to do it
Okay,
time.
no. Let me finish this point,
And then we'll do it.
No, then you can do it time. That's right. But I'm just making one more point, and then you can say what you like.
Sure.
Number two, فَكَسَوْنَا الْعِظَامَ لَحْمًا is the only interpretation in the Quran that the fa is chronological or ta'qib, meaning is it chronological? No. There are two interpretations in the Islamic understanding. One of them is that it is chronological, and the other one is that it's not chronological. And Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he takes the view that all of it happens in the first 40 days. And he mentions that in his sharh of the hadith of إن أحدكم ليكون في بطن أمه 40 يوما مضغة علقة نطفة ثم يكون علقة بعد ذلك ثم يكون مضغة بعد ذلك. And then he says, and then because excuse me, hold on. No, hold on. This hadith says, and
Wait.
let me finish. Let me finish. You need to hear all the data. Otherwise, you won't know what. Listen, let me finish.
You're not finishing.
Let me finish.
You're not finishing though.
Give me what?
You're not finishing.
Let me finish.
Carry on.
There's another way of the hadith.
Oh, here we go.
Another one.
Listen, please. Calm down, please. He said, there's another hadith, very important. ثُمَّ فِي ذَلِكَ مِثْلَ ذَلِكَ. This is very important. So he said that in the hadith of Muslim, and the hadith of Sahih Muslim, it's فِي ذَلِكَ مِثْلَ ذَلِكَ, which means in that time, listen, it means in that time, it will be like that. So because it said فِي ذَلِكَ مِثْلَ ذَلِكَ, the opinion of the Hanabila in the matter, the Hanbalis, is that it all happens in 40 days. Why is it there for that there's a difference of opinion among the fuqaha?
Wait, you're just making another point.
Please, man, stop. Stop. Let me say it. You can talk. Let me talk.
You're not finishing it.
Let me finish.
You're not finishing.
Let me finish.
You're not finishing.
Let me finish.
You're not finishing. But you're not finishing.
I'm gonna finish.
No, you're not though. You're
Is
just going
that
to make
okay?
another point.
Let me finish. Look, that's why the fuqaha have differed, the jurists have differed as to when a woman can have an abortion. Some say 120 days, some say 40 days. The ones who say it all happens within 40 days, based it on the hadith and the interpretation of the hadith of Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali and other Hanabila. Therefore, now
You're making another point.
in summary,
Hijab, let me reply.
in summary,
Just making another point.
In summary, number one, the interpretation of chronology is not consensus. Number two, even if we say it is, it includes the cartilaginous models, and that is what, according to this book, which is an authority that all of the doctors are using, is actually happening, ossification and mesogenesis are happening at the same time, and that means to say that the cartilaginous models are moving in the way that the Quran says. You have nowhere to go.
Okay, so now let me reply. Now let me reply. So, okay, we're just going to change the battery.
Let him go, please. Now I'm going to give him his time. No one interrupt him.
Tell that to Mansour.
You told him to come.
Please, everybody, make sure that you don't interrupt him, because whatever he says is going to be refuted, and then we're going to move on to the Bible, where he's going to have nowhere to run.
Okay, so, guys, I listened carefully to the book that he quoted. What I heard was that bones and flesh grow together. But if you remembered, when I asked Hijab to name the stages, he said, and you'll see the flashback on our picture on Soko Films, he said that bones came before flesh.
He did.
That's what he said.
Yes.
So he said the bones came before flesh, and then he quoted a book that said exactly the opposite. And he thought that I wouldn't notice.
He has comprehension
And he
problems.
thought that I wouldn't notice.
Tactic.
But I did notice, because I have examined this sophistry before, and I understand its rudimentary tactic. The idea is to blind you with lots of big sounding words. Let me just clarify.
Let him speak, please.
Let me just clarify.
Clarify, Bob.
In another part of the Quran, so we read 23, 12 to 14.
We did.
But in Surah 2, Ayah 259, it also says exactly the same. It's towards the end of the verse. if
Yeah,
you're
no,
getting
no.
recited.
There's two qira'ats in that one.
Yeah,
ثم ننشزها عظمى and ثم ننشرها عظمى.
right. Okay, let me give the English.
But you won't get what both qira'ats in English.
Let me give the English, bro. Yeah.
So that's why you need
I am
somebody
still
who knows.
making my point, Hijab.
It's fine, bro. You can
Hijab,
take your
I'm still
time.
making my point.
Take your time, please.
Yep. Okay. So,
There's nothing
in
to hide
Surah
here.
259, it reads.
Yeah, please.
Because if I get to it.
Do you want me to help you out with that?
No, I can find it. Thank you. It's just a case of.
It's not about embryology, you know that.
It said. Now notice, it said it's not about embryology.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's actually look at whether it talks about embryology.
Okay, yeah.
It says this. And thus we have made of you a sign for the people. Look at the bones, how we bring them together and clothe them with flesh. When this was clearly shown to him, he said, I know that Allah is able to do all things.
you read the
No,
verse
don't
before?
interrupt. You insisted that I didn't interrupt. I'm going to say everything I've got to say. You got to listen.
Okay, no problem.
So the fact of the matter is, in two places, the Quran says bones, then flesh. Hijab said bones, then flesh, and then quoted a book that said flesh and bones grow together. That's what he did. And he hoped you wouldn't notice. Now he also talked about ossification. He also talked about ossification. The reality is, unless Hijab wants to say that he is an embryologist, it is clear from every work of embryology that bones are not immediately ossified. They begin as cartilage. The Quran does not mention cartilage. He said, have you got a problem with that, when he quoted the lexicon? And I said, yes, I do. But he insisted that he finish all of his many, many points. Are you honestly telling me that Allah doesn't have a word for cartilage when he wants to talk about cartilage?
Have you guys got a
And he
timer?
doesn't have a word for
can you
bones
get a
when he
timer?
wants to talk
Should we
about bones.
time it?
No, you're going to listen. He's losing his patience now. He wants. Oh, and look at the interruption.
He was interrupting you. He was interrupting you.
Sorry. Calm down.
Sorry. So,
Tell me when you're finished.
yeah, I'm going to. But I'm going to finish all my points. Like you mentioned a lot.
Do you wanna-
I've tried.
do you wanna-
No, don't
do you wanna do
interrupt.
time?
Don't interrupt.
I'm not
Stop
interrupting.
interrupting.
He's mentally insane.
Just stop interrupting. Right. So, the reality is, and I just challenge you to check me now.
Back up down.
Do bones, what is a bone? A bone is an ossified cartilage. There is a reason why we have distinct words for cartilage and bones.
In English.
And what you're saying is Allah is inaccurate in his description because he can't use a word for cartilage. He uses one that could mean cartilage and could mean bones, or could mean the two things together. If he means the two things together, then it's an error because cartilage is not bone. If it could be cartilage or could be bone, then it's an error because it should be cartilage, not bone. So either way, the Quran is wrong. Now, he said, Hijab. Are you impressed at my memory of how I've remembered all your arguments? He said,
What did he say?
how dare you, a layman in philosophy, a layman in Arabic, a layman in embryology, have the audacity to stand in front of me. Do you all remember him saying that? Do you see, he's not the only one with a good memory. Let's just correct a fact. He came and stood in front of me, not the other way around. But secondly, he is a layman in embryology. He is a layman on this topic, but I'll tell you someone who isn't a layman in embryology.
You're a layman.
Here's someone who isn't a layman in embryology.
Can I say something? Interruption.
So, someone who isn't a layman in embryology is Dr. P. Said Myers, a human biologist from the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
He describes the Quran's understanding of embryology as follows:
Read it.
vague and fuzzy and basically stealing from Aristotle. That's what a real embryologist says about the Quran.
Stealing. What does he know about the Quran?
Now, why? This is the interesting point.
Yeah.
Why does he say the Quran is stealing from Aristotle?
Why?
Now, personally, I think he's wrong. I think there were Arab doctors at the time who were educated in medicine. But if you listen to Aristotle's words, listen to this.
Read it, Bob.
This is quoting Aristotle's work on the parts of animals.
Okay.
Aristotle lived 350 years before Christ, which makes him 1,000 years before Muhammad.
I thought it was 337.
And listen, no, 350. And this is what he says. Stop interrupting. In the this is embryology according to Aristotle.
Bob.
Listen.
Say.
Around about the bones and attached to them by the fibrous bonds grow fleshy parts, for the sake of which the bones exist. Does that sound familiar? Bones, then flesh. That was a common understanding at the time of Muhammad.
Yeah, you're right.
There is nothing miraculous about what the Quran says,
Nothing.
and the Quran gets it wrong.
Right, thank you very much. Now it's my turn to respond, but I do think we should time it, by the way, because we don't know.
Oh, now you want it timed?
No, I do think so.
I agree, let's time it.
What do you want? 5 minutes each?
5 minutes each. Can we get a timer, please?
5 minutes each or 4
And you've
minutes?
got to be willing to show your phone to
3
both
minutes.
of us on request.
5 minutes is better.
Are you willing to show your phone to both of us on request? Okay.
All right. Now, before I, but actually,
Let him get it.
We just
Yeah, he's going to touch it.
So you said 5 minutes.
it's
5
okay.
minutes each.
We got this.
Okay, go. Yeah.
Oh, Hijab.
Let's read it again, because I don't think this man has good comprehension skills. He said that, no, he doesn't have good comprehension. This is the problem. We're dealing with someone who can't understand. He said that it said that both of them are forming at the same time. No, it doesn't say that. It says soon after the cartilaginous models of the bone have been established. So first what we have, cartilaginous models of the bones have been established, yeah? Then it says what? The myogenic cells, which have now become myoblasts, yes, aggregate to form muscle masses. Now let me explain what it's saying here. It's saying that you have cartilage, or these cartilaginous models, and then you have the myoblasts, which are myogenic cells, which then become myoblasts that are coming on top. Is that what it says, yeah? Everybody knows who has done even a little bit of reading in embryology that myoblasts are the cells that are responsible for muscle growth. That is a fact of embryology. Go to any book of embryology that you like. It is responsible for flesh. So he's saying that it's saying it at the same time. No, it's not. It's saying first the cartilaginous models have been established, and then after that you have the myogenic cells which are responsible for flesh that are coating them, exactly as the Quran states, if you want to take the chronological reading. As I've said though, that's not the only interpretation of the Quran, because there's fa at-taqibiyya, the fa which comes as like thumma, which is for chronology, and fa as fa as-sababiyya, or a fa that's not necessarily like that, فَكَسَوْنَ الْعِظَامَ لَحْمَ, that we have clothed the bone with muscle. So that's point number one, completely and utterly refuted. He said it said, and this is false. It's demonstrably false. He said it at the same time. Where is in what I read saying the same time? Can you read and understand? Do you understand that myogenic cells are responsible for flesh? Do you understand that ossification is responsible for bones? But he said ossification continues. Do you know when it continues until? It continues until adulthood, by the way.
Correct.
Yeah, so what's that got to do with our discussion? He said that no, he could have used the word ghudruf or the word specifically for cartilage. That's not necessarily a good description. You know why? Because had there been any bone that started, then that would eliminate. So all the word azam includes cartilage and bone, whereas the word ghudruf is cartilage only and not bone, so it would exclude the bone, which would be less specific. Point number three, he mentioned Aristotle. Aristotle said in his treatises that a woman, she has menstruation blood, contributes to the embryological process. I want you to find me one verse of the Quran or one hadith of the Prophet where that is in fact copied. If he copied from Aristotle, why is he not copying that? Aristotle also said that the baby is formed in its entirety and then it just gets bigger and bigger. That's completely against the Quran and the Sunnah. How comes Aristotle did not mention nutfat and amshaj, whereby both of the mixed fluids are there? Where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he mentioned the hadith. Listen to this. The Prophet Muhammad mentions لَيْسَ الْوَلَدُ مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلِّهِ, that the boy or the child is not from the entire fluid. Meaning now, what is the Quranic picture? Chapter number 76, verse number 2. إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ أَمْشَاجٍ نَبْتَلِيهِ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا, that we have made the human being from a combined mixture of fluids and to test him, and we have made him hearing and seeing. So wait a minute, it's saying it's mixed, and wait a minute, the Prophet said it's a part of that mixed fluid, not all of it, which is, we know, it's one cell of the man and one cell of the woman. There's nothing like that in the Bible at all, my friend. You have no chance. There's nothing like that in Aristotle's work at all, my friend. There is nothing like that in Galen's work at all, my friend. And there's nothing like that in the Talmud at all, my friend. How did he know this? Where did he get this from? Did he get it from the Bible, where it says that human being is made like curd or cheese? Where it says in Job chapter 9, verse number 6, that the earth is flat and has pillars, and no one in the patristic, listen, no one in the patristic period for 300 years, not one, I claim now, has ever said that the earth is round based on the biblical narrative. Everyone was a flat earthist. John Chrysostom, when he done his exegesis of the Bible, and others. And if you look at Origin of Alexandria, he was a spiritualist, and others.
5 seconds.
All of this shows that the Bible has no way of connecting with today's science, and the Quran does.
There's food! There's food! Yeah. We can all do a shouting match.
Give him 5 minutes.
Right, okay. Ready? So, ladies and gentlemen, there was a lot there. Again, the hijab went on to say, firstly, we need to establish something, that even in ancient times, the Greeks knew that the world was round. This is not something new. It is an Enlightenment myth that people in the past thought that the world was flat. And I won't take a lecture from Mohammed Hijab about the shape of the earth when the Quran says that earth is stretched out like a carpet.
Oh, yeah.
Well, have you ever seen a round carpet? Or are carpets flat when they are stretched out?
Flat.
So Mohammed has just chucked his Quran under the bus. No, he went on to talk about the fact that the Quran mentions that the child is created from the fluid of the woman and the fluid of the man. This is an error. It is not a fluid, it is an egg. It is a cell. It isn't a fluid. So he has just exposed the Quran for another error. Because as the Quran says, and we'll quote it, and we made the nutfa, thank you, into a clot. Sorry, here we go. Thereafter we made him, the offspring, as a nutfa, drops of male and female sexual discharge. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if I have to tell you that an egg is not a fluid, it is an egg, a cell, then you don't know what a fluid is, and it would appear neither does your God. But firstly, it says a drop of male fluid.
It's too hot.
A drop of male fluid, ladies and gentlemen, contains thousands of sperms. So the Quran is also wrong there, because a drop of what we would consider a drop of sperm has thousands of the cells of sperms within it, if not tens of thousands. But it's only one sperm that creates the human embryo. Furthermore, this idea of females contributing to the genesis of another human being is not unique to the Quran. There were other Greek philosophers who taught embryology who believed exactly the same. Now he said, what about the idea of the woman's blood contributing to the birth of a human embryo? He objected to the idea of the menstruation blood, and obviously he's right to do so. But the Quran says this: then we made the nutfa into a clot of coagulated blood. A clot of coagulated blood is not what an embryo is ever. A clot of coagulated blood is dead blood. It is stopping based upon a cut. It is stopping rupture. It is stopping bleeding. So the Quran is wrong there. So now we've got, in addition to the embryology error, we also have the error that the Quran says the world is flat, like a carpet, stretched out. Thank you. And that is also an error. Remember, he condemned the church fathers for being flat earthers, but the Quran is a flat earther. It describes the world as being stretched out like a carpet. Now, he goes on to talk about the fact that the ossification, he quoted his book again, and he's trying to mislead you, because that full quote, do you honestly believe that bones grow without any skin or flesh? Where's the photo evidence? There's no such thing. Flesh and bone grow together. Notice the interruption. It grows at the same time. That is the conclusion of embryologists. And we've got two facts now that the Quran gets wrong: a flat earth and embryology.
All right. I want to break a news to everybody. You know PZ Myers, the one he quoted as the embryology authority, who said that the earth was inaccurate. Do you remember that one? That the Quran is inaccurate. You remember the one he quoted? He retracted that statement 1 week ago. And it's on the public record that he retracted that statement 1 week ago, and he said, in fact, I retract this point. That PZ Myers, the person here. Point number one. Point number two is this. the main point he was saying is that the book doesn't say that the cartilaginous models come before the myogenic cells form around them. I've quoted it again, and there is a chronological, sequential, step by step, which completely negates what you're saying. Point number 3, there is an interpretation which says both are happening at the same time. So all of these things, you have nothing for them. He then talked about the flat earth. Here's what I say, and it is a challenge to the Christian world, not just you, because you are insignificant. You are challenged to the Christian world. Be quiet, don't interrupt. Don't interrupt. There is not one church father in the first 300 years of Christianity that ever looked at even one verse in the Bible and concluded that the earth is round. Whereas there are scholars in the first 300 years of Islam who looked at the Quran itself and deduced from that the earth is round. Ibn Munada being one of them, who Ibn Taymiyyah mentions in Kitab al-Arsh, and that is something that is there. Ibn Hazm being another one who quotes chapter 39 verse 5, يُكَوِّرُ اللَّيْلَ عَلَى النَّهَارِ وَيُكَوِّرُ النَّهَارَ عَلى اللَّيْلِ وَسَخَّرَ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ كُلٌّ يَجْرِي لِأَجْلٍ مُسَمًّى. Chapter 39 verse 5. And listen, this is takwir, comes from the Arabic word kura, which means ball. Be quiet, my friend. Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth, my man.
Calm down,
having said
Hijab.
this, having said this, now
You're getting excited, mate. Calm down.
no, it's not finished. Be quiet. Ali, be quiet. Here's what I was saying. Look, listen to this. Listen to it. Be quiet. Listen. Now, what have the Jews said about the Bible? They believed in something called metal plate theory. Look what he said. That in the Midrashim, which is the exegesis of the Bible, for how many hundreds of years, not the exegetical traditions of people like Augustine, when he started mentioning the round rotundity of the earth. That's a different situation, yes.
Augustine was a church father.
Yeah, but he didn't look at the Bible and say it was round because of the earth. And if you look at John Walton, who is a Christian scholar, he mentions the circle of the earth, which is mentioned in Isaiah chapter 40 verse 22, and he said, but that by consensus this means like a disc. So don't ever come to me with this. I have already told you, Ibn Hazm, Ibn Munada, the Salaf, the people and the Salaf of the first 500 years saying the earth is round because of the Quran. Not one church father says the earth is round because of the Bible. Respond or be condemned.
Okay, that was brilliant oratory. I think he deserves a round of applause. That was absolutely brilliant. So, are we all done? By the way, Allah is not a mouse. He's not a mouse. Doesn't matter how many times you say he's a mouse, he's not a mouse. Akbar means mouse. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was a brilliant piece of oratory, but unfortunately complete flannel. And the reason why it was complete flannel, ladies and gentlemen, is because the church fathers were not trying to argue that you should become Christian because of science. This is a modernist style of argument. Notice the interruption. This is a modernist style of argumentation. The early church fathers were trying to convince people to become Christian by using philosophy, because that was the lingua franca of education at their time, and they were good at it. The reality is, in the book of Job, if you want to mine some verse to quote the idea of the earth being round, in the book of Job it says, and blessed is he who sits upon the circle of the earth.
It's Isaiah, by the way.
No, it's in Job.
It's Isaiah, by the way.
In Job, stop interrupting. No, furthermore, he said, oh, we've got all these Muslim scholars who believe that the world is round because of the Quran. Why did they even bother? Pythagoras knew the world was round before Jesus. The Greeks knew the world was round before Jesus. It wasn't a new thing. And they didn't need a revelation to do it either. But actually, let's listen to what the Quran says about the shape of the earth. It says, have we not made, everyone say made, the earth as a bed. A bed is what the Quran says. When was the last time you slept on a circle bed? You sleep on a flat bed, Hijab, not a circle bed. So yes, Muslim scholars believe that the world was round, but so did the Greeks 1,000 years before them. 1,000 years before them. And the Quran says that the world is made like a bed. So, stop interrupting. So, now coming back to this question about ossification and bones. So, ossification and bones. Basically, Mohammed Hijab has admitted a few things. Number one, he has admitted that some Muslims do, and he seems to be one of them, interpret the verses of the Quran as sequential. So I'm not misrepresenting Islamic beliefs. There are Muslims that argue it. Two, he has admitted that there are alternative words for both cartilage and bones. And I need to remind you that the reason why we call cartilage cartilage and not bone is because they are not the same thing. They are ossification. That went really quick for 5 minutes. Anyway, fair enough. So in terms of ossification, Allah could have used the right term. The reality is, biologists will tell you that bones and flesh come from the same material, the mesoderm. Bones and flesh come at the same time from mesoderm. And he didn't like Dr. P.Z. Myers. He said that he retracted it. I'd like to see the reference. I want to see the proof, because it's easy to say he retracts it. I want to see the proof. But it's not just Dr. P.Z. Myers that says this. It's also Dr. Joseph Needham, who dismisses Quranic descriptions of embryology as a cheap rip-off of classical text. And Dr. Joseph Needham is also an embryologist, and he studied the history of embryology. So we have nothing unusual in the Quran, nothing miraculous in the Quran. The Greeks knew it beforehand. And also, the Quran gets it wrong. And he's talking about patristic fathers.
Okay. All right, guys. Let me read out. He said it's Job. The circle of the earth is in the book of Isaiah. As I corrected him and told him he doesn't want to believe me, but it's there. And look at this. Look at what John Walton, he says this by word. One of the supported texts on this, sorry. He says, so basically here. One of the most common examples given by those who suggest that there is a latent scientific consideration is Isaiah 40:22, which posits a spherical earth. This cannot be sustained because its terminology indicates a disc, not a sphere. A disc, not a sphere. Walton, 2009, page 174. And the word used here is hug. Hug in the Hebrew language does not mean a sphere. Hug in the Hebrew language, by the consensus of those who speak, by the consensus of the Midrashim, by the consensus of Aha and all those individuals, it means a disc, not a sphere. So tell me now. Tell me now. I want to know. The people want to know. He wants to know. Even this guy wants to know. One verse in the Bible which can particularly be interpreted in a way to in any way, direct, indirect, indicate that the rotundity of the earth rather than the flat disc nature of the earth, which was the consensus of the Jewish Midrashim, the consensus of all of those who have ever looked at the Bible and had a cosmology because of it. That's the first point. The second point is this. He keeps mentioning the mesoderm. I don't think he understands what the mesoderm is. The mesoderm is the flesh that comes over the cartilaginous models. I've already explained this. You can go back to the references. If you don't like it, there's another interpretation which implies simultaneity, that the bone happening at the same time. No problem. There are two interpretations. Number three, I'm not making the argument that all of this is miraculous. I've not said that. I believe that the Quran speaks in a way that everybody can understand. From the physicist to the farmer, from the 7th century dweller to the 21st century man. Does he not know what he created? And he is the all-subtle, all-aware. He is the all-subtle and all-aware. Yes. So Allah speaks in a way that the Bible does not speak in. That people from the very early times, the Christian scholars themselves, were making a mockery of the literal reading of the Bible. Look at Origin of Alexandria again. Listen, it doesn't matter. He says this. He talks about this. How? He says, listen, he says, how could it possibly have happened literally? Either that the devil should have been led Jesus up to a high mountain, or that his fleshly eyes he should have shown all the kingdoms. He's saying, how could he see all the kingdoms when all the nations were not at the foot of the mountain? That implies flat earth. That implies, I'm telling you now, defend your Bible. Stop trying to think you have something on the Quran. Where in the Bible, give me one person that ever existed that said that the earth was round because of the words of the Bible. You said Job and mentions hug. He mentioned the sphere, he mentions the disc of the earth. John Walton, who is a scholar of Christianity, says this cannot be sustained because the word means it is a sphere, it is a disc and not a sphere. Case closed, my friend. Takwir comes from the word kura, which means a ball and not something which is flat. It's over, my friend. How dare you come and talk to me about science when in Genesis chapter 5, if you add up all the days together, as have the young age creationists, you will come to the conclusion that the universe is 6,000 years old. 6,000 years old. And wait a minute, how do you know that Genesis chapter 5 has all these lineages from Adam to his son, from his son to his son, 130 years, 150 years. Add it all up like Noel has done, and you have 6,000 years. You have the audacity to talk about some minor thing when it comes to embryology, when your Bible-bashing friends in America have museums and institutions. Hundreds of millions of pounds are being spent on the idea that the universe is 6,000 years old. How dare you tell us that the universe is 6,000 years old and that all these fossils are a conspiracy, and come to me and us as the Muslim community and talk about science? How do you defend yourself against the fact that you have all these fossils, all these facts, and you have your Bible-bashing mental man syndrome individuals that are believing the universe is 6,000 years old? The flat earthers were probably Bible-believing flat earthers. This is the reality of the situation. Don't ever come here again and talk about science or anything else, because it's over. And for more information, go to kbyh.co.uk and go to my article on the proofs of the
So allow me to reply. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready?
Right now you're wasting time. Is it fun? Okay. You don't mind wasting time.
Okay, so where is this?
Bob, you're wasting time.
Right.
I'm timing.
So, in terms of church fathers who believed that the earth was round, he wanted me to show him one.
No, I didn't.
Erastus
No, I didn't. I said
Stop
from the Bible. From the Bible.
Stop interrupting.
From the Bible.
Stop interrupting.
From the Bible.
Stop interrupting. So, he wanted me to show him one. Eratosthenes of Alexandria, 276 to 194, calculated that the circumference of the earth within 50 miles of its present estimate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in the book of Job, one of the oldest books in the Bible, historians credit the Greeks with being the first to suggest a spherical earth in the 6th century BC by Pythagoras, who suggested it. However, it was known before him the round shape of our planet is something that was common knowledge all the way from the time of Jesus' time to the present. That is why Christopher Columbus went to the Americas, because they believed that the world was round. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear about something. We Christians have never made a claim that the Bible is a scientific textbook free from error. That is not a Christian claim. That is not what the Bible claims. So he's judging something by a false standard. He's timing me.
Well, now he is.
So, ladies and gentlemen, time please. So, yeah. So, in terms of our time. Okay, thank you. In terms of our time, ladies and gentlemen, Christians don't teach or believe that the Bible is perfect. That is a Quranic claim about the Quran. So you have to judge the Quran by what the Quran says, and the Bible by what the Bible says. So the Bible says it is here to teach you about who God is and how to live. It doesn't claim to be perfect like the Quran. So when the Quran, stop interrupting. Stop interrupting.
But when the Quran says what?
So when the Quran, bear with me, stop interrupting.
You know, it's offensive.
So stop interrupting. So when the Quran describes the earth like a bed, put your hand up if you think a bed is a round ball. Go on, put your hand up. Oh, nobody, not one of them, not even hijab. But the Quran describes the earth like a bed. So I'm right to say that the Quran is in error. And if the Quran is in error, according to the Quran, not me, it's not from God. I need to defend the Bible in biblical terms,
1 minute left.
not in Quranic terms. 2 minutes left. In Quranic terms.
Added time.
No, you took time away last time. In terms of the Quran, it states facts that are wrong, and I can say according to the Quran that it is false. According to the Bible, we do not make the claims about our Bible that Muslims make about their Quran. So him coming here and saying, don't come here and say this and say that, trying to act like the macho man, as if somehow this is impressive, does not escape the errors in the time I have.
1 minute 20.
Now 1 minute 20. So I want to do 1 minute 20. You took time away last time. You took time away last time.
Give him another minute, please.
Yeah.
Give him another minute.
Spent his time
No,
doing
give him another minute, please.
Thank
He
you.
needs another minute.
So in Surah 43:10, as if you were in any doubt about what the Quran said previously, Surah 43:10, it says this: who made for you the earth like a bed, and has made for you roads therein in order to find your way. Like a bed. Who believes the earth is flat? Put your hand up. The Muslims don't, but the Quran does.
Is it describing the shape?
No.
Describing the shape.
Ladies and gentlemen, he quoted Oregon. Oregon is not a church father. He lied to you. Oregon is not a church father. He's called an ecclesiastical writer. It's a step down from a church father. So he lied to you when he quoted Oregon. And we Christians don't follow the church fathers in their comments on science.
All right, done. Are you happy with that time?
Yes.
The time for him.
Is everyone happy with the time?
So
I'm happy with the time. Let me tell you something. This verse that he keeps bringing up this أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ مِهَادًا, this thing about bed. He keeps saying bed. Sorry, the word bed, the word mihada means cradle. So for example, when Mary alayhi salam, Maryam, when she was talking about Jesus, she mentioned that term, that the Mehd, when he was in the Mehd, the Sabiyya, which means what? Cradle. Now really, when a woman cradles a baby, she cradles it like that, like in a shaped way like that. That's point number one. Point number two, the shape was not what is intended here. That what was intended in Alam Naj'al al-Arda Mihada was the comfort. And how do we know that? Allah says in chapter number 67 of the Quran, هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه. That He is the one who had made the earth subservient for you. So walk around its manakib, literally meaning shoulders. What are you gonna say that it means like the earth is like boxes now? No, it means that the mountains are referred to in that sense. Go in these areas. But you don't understand imagery. The point of the matter is this: before the scientific revolution, there were interpretations of the Quran that indicated the rotundity of the earth. That is nowhere to be afforded to us in the Bible. I didn't say any church father. I actually mentioned to him in his exegesis against the Manichaeans. Augustine, he mentions the shape of the earth is round. You don't need Google for that. I can tell you myself. But he doesn't get... I know.
Can you let him speak?
But I'm not saying, my argument, I think you've misunderstood it, was not no church father believes that the earth is round. I'm saying, no, I said that they used the Bible to indicate that that's what the Bible was saying. John Walton, he mentions in Isaiah chapter 40 verse 22, the word hug means a disc. It cannot be used, it's the closest thing we have, but it cannot be used to indicate the rotundity of the earth. He says we don't have to have, he doesn't believe in biblical inerrancy. By the way, he might come from a more Catholic background, I don't know, but definitely a large portion of the Christian community, probably all of those in this park, believe in biblical inerrancy, which is the idea that the Bible is flawless. He is heretic in his belief, according to those. No, he is. According to evangelicals who believe in biblical inerrancy, he would be seen as a heretic. He knows that. Now, moreover, here's the point. When you first open the Bible, and I say this again, the first thing you see in the Bible is contradiction. Let me show you how. That you find in Genesis chapter 1. The luminaries were created, through them mystical truths may be indicated. Yeah. He is saying, therefore, that he has to spiritualize and allegorize the verses of the Bible in order to keep away from the biblical internal contradiction. It's not just an external one, but an internal one. How do we know that? Because vegetation is mentioned as happening on the fourth day in Genesis chapter 1. But when you look at Genesis chapter number 2, verse number 6, it said that no plant has sprung up yet. So much so that even scholars are saying this is a contradiction. How could you have the vegetation on the fourth day in Genesis 1 and then in Genesis 2:6 it says no plant has sprung up yet? So were the plants there or were the plants not there? That's the question. Were day and night there? How can you have day and night without the sun? You're talking nonsense. How dare you come with this to us? How dare you, our clowns? You're coming to us and talking about science. You've got a 6,000-year-old universe which he didn't even mention. He didn't even refute it. He can't defend himself. He can't defend himself. He had one bullet in the gun, it went astray. Now he can't defend himself. He's beneath me. I'm in the mount. I'm slapping. I'm punching. He knows what I'm talking about. He's an MMA fighter. One day maybe he can challenge me. So forth. No problem.
You're wasting your time.
And so on and so forth. And that's it. I say this to you today, and I say to you with all my vigor and all the confidence. He has no answers to the rotundity problem, 6,000-year problem, to the eternal contradiction problem, and I have all the answers today.
So, it's always true that if you give a man like Hijab enough rope, he'll hang himself. And that is exactly what he just did. Exactly what he just did.
Use this point next.
He admitted
that
there's
no sun. How can you have vegetation?
A church father believed that the earth was round. He just spent ages arguing that no church father believed that the earth was round from the Bible, but then admits that Augustine did. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, reality is, and he quote, notice the interruption again. Notice the interruption. Pause my time.
Pause this time, please. Pause this time.
Yeah. Right. Are you
Pause
done?
this time.
Okay. You done?
Go.
Okay. Ready? Are you ready?
He asked you from the
Are you done?
You can't.
Okay.
From the Bible.
He's
Right,
gonna
are you
ignore
done?
it because he's deaf.
When you done?
Listen to you.
Okay. Ready.
He's
Go.
ignorant.
So, Augustine himself and Origen, whom he quotes, both interpret Genesis allegorically. That is the orthodox historical use of Genesis. It's only fundamentalists in the 20th century that shouted and screamed about a literal interpretation of Genesis. This is not how the Christian fathers used Genesis. So he just shot his entire argument dead because he evidenced the fact that the historical use of Genesis is allegorical and non-literal, not literal. So he's attacking the Bible based upon a literal reading when he admits that the church fathers don't do that, and then he says, show me the church fathers that do X, Y, and Z. But glory to God, the Holy Spirit that inspired Genesis was smarter than Origen and apparently smarter than Hijab. Because the reality is, Hijab, and here's a very brief summary of physics, that a sun is a collapsing gas cloud. Before it meets the point of nuclear fission, of driving atoms together, elements together to form bigger elements, it gives off light, it gives off radiation. If you were stood there before the sun became a sun and entered into nuclear fission, you would be able to detect its light and you would be able to detect its heat. So actually, given this fact, it is true that there would have been light in the infrared spectrum before there was light from a sun. That would have come later. Infrared spectrum.
Please, please, please.
The infrared spectrum. Are you honestly telling me, are you so ignorant of physics that you think a sun reaches nuclear fission before it gives off heat? Go back and pick up your GCSE study books. You're laughing at your own ignorance. No, that infrared radiation, ladies and gentlemen, would have been the very source of food. I do not believe that Genesis needs to be taken literally. I don't believe that. The church fathers don't believe that. So, he's attacking the Bible based upon a 20th century belief that comes from America, not the historical belief of the church. He's undone his own arguments, but he believes that the Quran is perfect. The Quran describes the earth as a bed. Do you believe the earth is a bed? But more than this, here's another error in the Quran.
Another one.
Until when he reached the setting place of the sun, he found it setting in a spring of black, muddy water. Put your hand up if you believe that the sun sets in a puddle of mud. Who believes that? Nobody. Not even Hijab. So, on one hand, we don't need to square the Bible with science in Christianity.
He already has.
But on the other hand, the Quran is in error even though it claims not to be. So, you can stand there and do your macho routine and try to be the big man, but intellectually, Hijab, you're beaten in your criticism of my faith and the defense of your own.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, listen to this. Listen to this.
Sorry, it started 53 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take off.
Sorry? Okay, yes, fine.
It
Seconds.
still
Yeah.
counts.
All right, no problem. 40 now. He says that he's trying to portray that the typical interpretation of the biblical corpus from an ecclesiastic and patristic perspective, the church fathers, was an allegorized understanding, and there's no further thing away from the truth, as understood by R.C. Hanson, a known scholar who wrote because of the Bible, but despite it. He was an Aristotelian, and he came to that conclusion. My challenge to him was to find someone who uses the Bible and exegetes it to have a spherical or rotundity of the earth perspective. Number two. Number three, he says that he tries to imply that Augustine, he had the approach of Origen of Alexandria, which was an anomalous and aberrational approach in the exegetical method of the ecumenical church fathers, when actually the truth of the matter is he actually didn't even know that Augustine, who is a 5th century scholar, actually named his exegesis on a literal interpretation of the Bible. He had two. He had one called Against the Manichaeans, and he had one called On a Literal Interpretation of the Bible. So this guy doesn't even know his own books. I know more than him on his own books. Now listen to this. This is going to be a good night argument. I promise you today, he will go to sleep. He will go to sleep.
I am getting bored.
Okay, you will go to sleep. You are going to go to sleep. Just like I'm sure he has been many times in the ring. I'm going to say this to you once, and I'm going to say it to you very clearly. One time, Celsus, who was an apologist, he came to asked Origen of Alexandria, what do you say? How can you have a God that died on the cross?
Yeah.
Do you know how he responded? Do you know how he responded?
He's moving on.
Do you know how he responded?
I'm going to take you
He's definitely going to sleep.
Do you know how he responded? Go kbyh.co.uk and download my PDF on the truth of Islam. You'll find all the references there. He basically allegorized. He said, cannot say that all of the events relating to the crucifixion are true and excuse me. Can you stop? Can you stop talking? Yeah, I know, but I can't. You're not even listening to what I'm saying.
The point is,
You're not even engaging with
Come
his
on.
points.
So, listen, look at me. Origen of Alexandria, when he was asked by Celsus, and this is referenced in my article on kbyh.co.uk, he was asked, what do you say of the crucifixion? What do you say of Jesus dying on the cross? He said it should not be seen as literal. In other words, the same spiritualizing, allegorical understanding that he employed with Genesis, he employed with the crucifixion. So if you want to have your cake, you can't eat it, because the reality of the situation, if you start saying that this is an allegory, you might as well say the crucifixion was an allegory. If you want to use the hermeneutical principles of Origen of Alexandria, it's over. You want to allegorize Genesis, allegorize the crucifixion, just as Origen allegorized it, just as he metaphorized it. Why do you have it? What's your principle? What's your principle for allegorization? What is your hermeneutical principle? How can you allegorize one and not the other? Why? On what basis? Who gave you the authority to allegorize Genesis and not allegorize what? The crucifixion. Origen of Alexandria, when probed by Celsus, he allegorized the crucifixion, meaning your central tenets, the crucifixion, the resurrection, the ascension, and so on and so forth. All of that can be allegorized. And if it is allegorized, what remains of Christianity? It's all fallen apart. It's all gone. It becomes a myth, just like Hinduism. It becomes like the Greek mythology. It becomes like anything else. So there you have it. If you want to say it's allegorized, then you must allegorize. You must allegorize the crucifixion, because there is no authority that you may be granted. There is no authority that you, hermeneutical authority, yes, that you may have, yes, there's no hermeneutical authority that you have to allegorize one and not the other. And that's why it's done, and that's why you're finished, and that is why you can never stand in front of me. And you can have the rest of the time.
I'm giving rest. I'm giving I gave him an extra 55 minutes, 55 seconds, sorry.
Right, so, right.
Is
I've
this the
got
last
an extra.
one?
Yeah, shall we do this last one? Okay. So, am I speaking last?
Yeah.
Is this the last? Am I speaking last?
No, you go now. I'm gonna finish this. Is
No.
that what you want? You started.
You're the one
No,
that
you
started, so
started.
he
No,
finished.
no,
You started because you laid out the parameters of science, so I go last.
No, you
started
bring it
the
No, you started. You went. You talked. You Hijab. You laid out the parameters of science first. Remember? You laid out the parameters. You talked about the paradigm. So you started. So I have
From
to
that
finish.
perspective.
So I have
But
to
when do we
finish.
start the timing?
So I have to finish.
Do we start it from that?
This is the last talk.
Fine.
Okay.
Last round.
Right.
Last
I'm
round.
speaking last. This is the last talk, and then we
We
switch.
get a sugar.
Yeah, no.
He wants the sugar.
Curry time, 55
Right, are we ready? Are we ready?
This is your last round, and then
No,
afterwards.
this is the last talk. Done. After me. Done. Finished. That's it started.
If you're the only one speaking without...
Are you ready? Right, guys, ladies and gentlemen, listen carefully to the double standards that Hijab is asking you to work to. He is saying to you that you have to believe in a literal interpretation of Genesis. Why? Because of his quote of origin. Now, he didn't actually quote origin, he just threw his name into some statements. The fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, Origin is not a church father. So he's quoting the wrong source. Origin is called an ecclesiastical writer. Now notice that Hijab wanted me to pay attention, but he's not doing it now.
That's right, I'm just getting
So, ladies and gentlemen, we Christians are not committed to a literal interpretation of the Bible in toto. We don't do that. Our church fathers didn't do it. He's admitted as much. He said as much. He said that Augustine believed in a round earth. He said that. So we Christians don't need to defend every statement of the Bible as if it was literally true. Now he said that the description that Origin used was literal, that there was allegorical about the crucifixion. I know Origin's writings. I read Origin's writings. And he says that there are layers of interpretation to the scripture that include the literal and go beyond the literal. And he was talking about the metaphorical symbolism that we can pull from the crucifixion. He was not denying the historical event of the crucifixion. Hijab tried to mislead you.
How do you
Now, the Quran
no, on that.
has made a number of factually false statements. And it doesn't matter with what bombacity Hijab prances around in this little theatre of ours, flexing his muscles, kissing his muscles, and trying to talk about beating people up intellectually. The reality is that his Quran has finished his religion, because his religion, his Quran, says that if it was from any other than Allah, I would find errors therein. I would find contradictions. The Quran says bones became flesh. This contradicts embryology. The Quran says that the earth is flat. This contradicts our study of the world, which is clearly spherical. The Quran states that the sun sets in a puddle of mud. A puddle of mud. And it clearly doesn't set anywhere on earth. I have found errors in the Quran, and the only way they get around them is what? Is by saying, oh well, Muslim scholars knew better than their Quran. I agree, but so did the Greeks before Jesus know better than the Quran. He said, well, your church fathers didn't believe in the earth as being round from the Bible. But then he showed that those church fathers do believe in the circle of the earth.
Do you honestly believe that they would uphold the idea of the circle of the earth in one hand and then, as Christians, say that it contradicts the Bible? Of course they wouldn't. And why do they not see a contradiction? Because as the church fathers demonstrate consistently, the reading of the Bible is not meant to be a scientific text. It does not have to be read that way, nor does it have to be defended that way. And so his criticism of the Bible is misplaced, because it is not what we Christians believe. But he believes that every utterance of the Quran is true. And we have demonstrated that there are utterances of the Quran that are false. How many times does the Quran have to be wrong? Time. How many times does the Quran have to be wrong? Okay, I'll finish on this point then. How many times does the Quran have to be wrong before we say it is wrong? Once, twice, 3 times? You had 3 examples today. Only one will do. The reality is, bombastic as you are, Hijab, loud as you are, Hijab, you are intellectually scuppered because you are trying to defend a book that makes indefensible claims about itself. Okay. It's lovely talking to you. As always. No. We said that we were finishing on this talk. That's what.
No, let me do one, and you do one more.
Fair enough. One more round.
On the muddy pool one, Job chapter 1 verse 4 says the same thing, same exact thing. Job 1:4.
Time it. You time it over there. You want to time it? It's up to you. You can both time it at the same time.
Joshua, time it. He's going to time it.
You can both time it.
He'll show you the 5 minutes. Yeah, fine. Let him see the 5 minutes.
All right. Now, it's very important. Fine, you got it.
Okay.
It's important to know here, the 3 examples he gave. Number 1, the embryology, which we spoke about in detail. We said that there are 2 readings. One of them implies simultaneity and the other one doesn't. One of them is chronology. And even on the one that talks about chronology, we talked about with references the fact that including bones, or azm in Arabic language, is the cartilaginous models, which are referred to in Arabic as ghudruf, which according to Fairuz Abadi, he mentions that that's included in bones. So there's no issue here. Number 2, he talked about the earth as being a mahd, the earth as being a mahd. And we said that that was used in the context of Jesus being a baby boy in the cradle of his mother. It doesn't signify shape, but it talks about function. The function of the earth is facilitated for the human being. It's expansive. It's meant to be from the anthropocentric, phenomenological perspective. Number 3, he then talked about the muddy hatta either when Dhul Qarnayn went to the muddy spring. Now he said, فَوَجَدَهَا تَغْرُبُ فِي عَيْنٍ حَمِئَةٍ. He saw it, he observed it, he found it going into a muddy spring. This same terminology is mentioned in Surah Al-Naml, Surah Al-Qasas, chapter number 28, when the hudhud, when the bird says, إِنِّي وَجَدْتُ امْرَأَةً تملكهم وأوتيت من كل شيء ولها عرش عظيم رأيتها وقومها يسجدون للشمس من دون الله. This is mentioned about when the hudhud, the bird, saw the woman. So it's otherwise talking about from the perspective of the bird. So here again we talk about the perspective of Dhul Qarnayn. It's something which is clear. Number 2, number 3. So we talked about all 3 points. He then talked about origin of Alexandria. He was right that he is seen as an ecclesiastic church father, ecclesiastic patristic writer, and the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church have not put him as a church father. That's true. That's true. That is true to say. But because of something called the Origin crisis that happened after his death, in fact, in the 4th century or the 5th century. So having said that now, it doesn't matter because he actually agrees with Origen's hermeneutical method. In fact, all of the other church fathers, with almost no exception except for the Alexandrian school, didn't have the approach that Origen of Alexandria and Philo and others had. So number 3, now we have to ask. This is, he said, I didn't reference it, so let me reference it right now. This is what he says. Origen was after the crucifixion. He says the events that have been recorded to have happened to Jesus do not possess the full view of the truth in the mere letter And for each event is shown to be a symbol of something else by those who read the scripture more intelligently. This is in his book, Celsus CC, chapter 2, verse number 69. It's also mentioned kbyh.co.uk, and go to the article that I've written on it for all the references. Having said this now, the issue is he's admitted himself that the Bible is not free from error. And the Quran is making the point that you can't say the book is from God if it's not free from error. Now you have a decision to make. If you want to follow a book that is erroneous by the admission of this man, or a book which at least says it's a necessary, not even a sufficient condition for you to believe in a book which has no errors in order for it to be from God. He doesn't uphold the standard of biblical inerrancy because he knows that's an impossible standard for the Bible to maintain, and he admits candidly that the Bible is erroneous. And I may add, he didn't answer anything that I said. He didn't talk about the contradictions, the internal contradictions of the Bible, that in Origen's understanding and other people's, that even the Midrashim, they were confused. Why is it that it's mentioned that the luminaries were created on the fourth day, and that the sun and the moon, that the night and day were created on the first day? Why is it, how could you have, from a scientific perspective, the plantations created on the third day and the sun created on the fourth? What kind of photosynthesis will take place? Now, how can you have plantations on the third day on Genesis chapter 1, and in Genesis chapter 2 verse 6 no plant has sprung up yet? So here you have contradictions within the text, you have contradictions outside the text. So contradictory is it that even the ecclesiastic church writers like Origen of Alexandria here admits it, and that's why he had to allegorize it. But if you do that, then you must allegorize other things that he also allegorized, in which case you are in a hermeneutical dilemma, and it becomes a mythological tale that is no different from Greek myth or Hindu myth or anything else. If we start allegorizing one thing with no precedent, or at least aberrational precedent, then we must allegorize anything we want, and that is the situation he finds himself in.
Okay, right, let me reply to this. Because again and again oh wait, are you ready? Okay, go. So again and again and again, Hijab here creates a false dichotomy. He tries to tell you that you have to believe in Genesis literally. The early church fathers don't teach a literal interpretation of Genesis, so we don't need to defend the Bible literally. And so these problems that he's talking about are not there, because it's dependent upon how we interpret them. Don't interrupt Hijab.
Can you just tell me who?
Don't interrupt Hijab.
Who doesn't do it literally?
Pause.
I want to know.
Right, don't interrupt.
Who doesn't?
Don't interrupt.
Apart from Origin.
And no, we didn't do this to you, Hijab. You do this tactic all the time.
No, but I want to know.
Don't. You do this tactic all the time. It's just a dominating tactic. Control yourself. You're a trained fighter, for crying out loud.
Not really, he is.
Ready? Are you ready?
UFC
Ready? So, the fact of the matter is the church fathers is doing this simply to distract. Brother, don't please don't engage him. Right. So put 10 seconds back onto my time.
Give him 20, man.
Stop trying to do this tactic, Hijab. It's cheating, mate. You know it.
No, I'm just
Right. So we'll try again. So the church fathers don't teach a literal interpretation of Genesis. So he's attacking Genesis based upon the fact, well, how could the sun be there before plants? It contradicts science. When the book of Genesis was revealed, it wasn't revealed as a science lesson to the Hebrew Israelites. It was revealed as a theological lesson to the Hebrew Israelites. It was teaching the Hebrew Israelites that there is no God but one God, and He is the God of the stars, the plants, the rivers, the sea, the land, the birds, the things that crawl, and mankind itself. That's what Genesis is really teaching, and that is how the early church fathers interpreted Genesis. No, we Christians, he said, I teach that the Bible is in error. No, I don't. I teach that every word of the Bible is true, properly understood. And properly understood is not interpreting every word literally. And that is substantiated by the earliest strata of my writers, the Church Fathers. And he said it was just Origen. No, it wasn't. Augustine also did it. And Augustine wasn't from the Alexandrian school. He was birthed in Carthage. So again and again and again, Hijab lies and has to be corrected. And he's working on the 99-1 rule. That 99 people will not check what he says except one. No, notice he interrupts again because this is, yep. You done? Right. So, the fact of the Quran says that the fact the Quran makes these statements that the earth is a bed. Have you seen a spherical bed lately? Stretched out as a carpet. Have you seen a spherical carpet lately? These things are errors in the Quran. Now, what will he do? He will argue that these should be interpreted what? Allegorically. Allegorically. That's what he will say. Not literally. Because if we interpret the Quran literally, it's false. But if we use allegorical defense in the Bible, he says, oh, you can't do that. You're admitting that it's wrong.
I didn't say allegorical.
No. He misquoted Origen again. He misquoted Origen again. Misquoting means you take part of the text out of the text. I have Origen's books. Origen believes in the actual crucifixion of Jesus. I know he does. I've read it with my own eyes. And I will bring those books and we'll debate whether Origen believes that Jesus was really crucified next week, and I'll show you to be a liar. Are you up for that?
Well, let me answer
Good.
that.
Good. Well, let me finish. Let me answer that. Let me finish. Because Origen does believe in a literal crucifixion, but he also believes that the imagery of the crucifixion is so full of symbolism that you can pull meanings beyond the literal. And that's really what Origen believes. So he lied about Origen. He lied about the Church Fathers. He lied about our historical interpretation of the Bible.
That's right.
He lied about the way that we read of the Bible today. And he also lied to defend his Quran. Misquoting embryology books to say that bones grow without flesh.
10 seconds.
Time. 10 seconds. So, Origen, are you up for that debate next week about whether Origen believed in an actual crucifixion?
No, I don't say that Origen didn't believe in it.
Oh, he's changed.
No,
he doesn't.
Let me say. Okay, it's done now, yeah?
It's done.
Right. So yeah, well done. You actually do have some knowledge. It's good because when we came to Origen, according to Catholic canon, it's definitely, I know that's the case, that they didn't put him into, they didn't, because of the Origen crisis, so that's well done.
But you did say to everybody he was a church father.
No, I know, that was a...
So if you knew that, why did you lie to them?
Let me explain.
Yeah, explain to me why you lied to everybody.
Not every Christian's a Catholic. What I think you are, I didn't know you were a Catholic.
I'm not a Catholic.
All right, but I think you maybe lean in that direction. The point of the matter is the precepts you believe in will not be universally believed in by all Christians, and you accept that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So for example, today you argued against biblical inerrancy, and you know that that's one of the keystone belief systems of evangelical Christians.
Okay, so let me reply to that. Mohammed, you're going to be really embarrassed now because we have you multiple times on camera.
Not about embarrassing me.
Say 1 second. Saying to all the crowd that Origen was a church father. And just admitted also on camera that you knew it wasn't.
No.
So you lied to people. This is what the Dawah team do. They lie.
Let's say that he wasn't a church father.
He isn't.
Fine.
He's an ecclesiastical writer.
Right. He's an ecclesiastical writer according to the Catholic understanding. I grant you that.
All of them.
No. I understand that. It's no problem because of the Origen crisis. However, what I'll say is this. What I'll say is it's irrelevant because what I'm saying is in the patristic period. When we say patristic period here, we're talking about he falls within that time. And a lot of Catholic scholars, and by the way, the former Pope, I think Pope Benedict, he believed that he should have been a church father. Many are in Catholicism are actually saying that Origen of Alexandria, should be seen as a church father.
I'm really sympathetic to Origin.
Yeah, fair enough.
I like him.
That's what I'm saying. So whether that is something that the Catholic Church takes or not, that's something else. Origin of Alexandria, in terms of his allegorical understanding, here's my point. The issue that I was trying to say was that it's a hermeneutical principle.
Yes.
I'm not saying that he didn't or he couldn't read him to believe in a actual crucifixion or an actual
Thank you for
resurrection.
Thank you
because
for
you know,
admitting that.
R.C. Hansen, when he, I'm not sure, do you know who R.C. Hansen is?
No.
R.C. Hansen is one of the biggest Christian scholars of the last 100 years. You should know who he is. He writes against Origin of Alexandria.
Yep.
And what he says is, because one of the things that Origin does, he allegorizes the story of the four judges. Okay, and that's because of its genocidal nature and so on.
Yep.
You know this.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, the question that RPC Hansen, his full name, he puts forward is that what hermeneutical principle are you using to allegorize? And that's basically it. It's a bit slapdash. We don't know, like, why is he doing this? When you said of Augustine that sometimes he does, I sympathize with some of what you said, because what you said is, although yes, he wrote two, by the way, he wrote two exegeses on Genesis. He wrote one called Against the Manichaeans, and the other one is a literal interpretation of Genesis.
And he argues against the literal interpretation.
No, he doesn't do either. There's different. Look, here's what I will say.
He literally argues against the literal
I know what you're referring.
Genesis.
I've read this, by the way. I know
so you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. He doesn't, despite the fact that he calls it a literal interpretation, he doesn't have a consistent literal interpretation. I agree with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, but he is contradistincted to someone like Origin of Alexandria.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so Origin of Alexandria has completely, in terms of the spectrum of allegorization, Origin would fit on the far right, if you want to call it that. Would you agree with that?
There's definitely differences between Augustine and Origin, but the point is,
that's what I'm saying.
Right, but the point is Hijab, right?
So the Alexandrian school, in terms of if this is literal and this is allegorical, the Alexandrian school are here, and Augustine somewhere in the middle.
But the point is, right? What we've seen, and the thing is, you've admitted it all on camera, is that when the big crowd was around us, you were saying one thing. Now the debate's over, you're saying something else.
What I'm saying, but I'm saying it in front of the big crowd right here. Look, and it's going to go on.
I want to make
I'm doing this for academic honesty.
Wait, if you want to be academically honest, what you shouldn't be saying is that Origin doesn't believe in an actual crucifixion.
No, I'm not saying that.
Which is what you did say.
Okay, fine. Let me clarify.
And he heard it.
Let me clarify. What because this is a good point, yeah? Whether Origin believed...
I will debate you next week.
I don't need to debate.
Do you accept Origin believe in a literal crucifixion?
Like Paul, the question of, did Paul believe in that?
Of course he did.
Right, no, but you know that there is a discussion about it. Do you know about that?
There are discussions amongst heretics, yes.
Yeah, fine. But one man's heretic is another man's... One man's, heterodox is another man's orthodox.
Imam Bukhari being a perfect example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Imam Bukhari and Ahmad, all of them.
Yeah.
He's one man's, he's our orthodox, but he's the heretic.
He was considered a deviant in his own time.
Exactly that. Well, when we're doing the study of history, we have to try and be objective about these things. So what I'm saying is, on this point of Origin of Alexandria, my point wasn't that he might have rejected the crucifixion outright as a literal thing. I'm saying, like you said,
it's all right. He's just undone everything.
Calm down. Calm down.
When he was speaking, I was cutting him off.
We're actually talking alright. It's alright. We're talking okay.
Have some respect. Have some respect.
Don't let him go. You know he does it.
Have some respect.
Look, what I'm saying is, what I quoted when Celsus came to him was that when he was, and this is my, let me make it very clear what my postulation is. Okay, I don't want you to straw man because you have a tendency to that. In this discussion today, I said find someone who looked at the Bible, and then you forgot about the second point of what I said, and you just went with the first one. I want you to understand my argument, so you can, if you want to develop Christian products which are strong and veracious, you have to know my argument first, right?
I heard your argument.
No, but what? So listen carefully to what the argument is. The argument is not that Origin of Alexandria allegorizes everything, or that he might not believe in the resurrection or crucifixion. What I say is, what seems to be apparent from his works, and I talked about on First Principles, the Butterworth translation.
I have the First Principles.
Yeah, Butterworth. Look in the back of the book, yeah? Because there's like an appendix section. If you look at that, you'll find that his approach seems to be where something is contradictory, or seemingly contradictory, he allegorizes it.
Yep.
So what I'm saying is, he done that with Genesis, and then he done that again with the crucifixion. Because when Celsus came to Origin of Alexandria,
He didn't come to him.
what do you mean he didn't come to him?
They didn't sort of come together and have a discussion.
No, now you're being a bit ridiculous. Now, when they spoke to each other, like me and you are speaking to each other right now, right? When they spoke to each other, Celsus is not a Christian. You know that, yeah? Yeah. So when he was doing what I'm doing with you right now, he's debating him. So Origin was expected to provide an apologetic response. When he did, he allegorized. So what I'm saying is, where something seems inconsistent, he allegorizes. That's all I'm saying. And so therefore, from our paradigm, we're saying there shouldn't be any inconsistencies anyway. And even here's what we're saying. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So let me reply. Because what you've just said is admit that my principle is accurate. Because I said that you've got to judge the Quran from within an Islamic paradigm. And you've got to judge the Bible from within a Christian paradigm. And the historical Christian paradigm is not based upon literal prima facie interpretation. That is the historical, continuous use of scripture from the church fathers to the present. Church fathers today are still doing the same thing. One second. You believe that the Quran is inerrant in all of its statements, but you never addressed the flat earth. And when you did address it, you said it was from the perspective of the people. So kind of the same kind of arguments that a flat earth.
But that's not the same as allegorization.
Well,
you know that.
Yeah, but one second. But that statement that you've made about from the perspective of the birds isn't coming from the Quran. That is coming from you as an apologist defending what the Quran is plainly saying. That's
the genetic fallacy, right? Because what you've just fell into is the genetic fallacy. Whether I'm offering an apologetic reply or not is irrelevant. Most of your church fathers, like Justin Martyr, was an apologist. It doesn't mean just because he's doing that what he's saying is wrong. So you're better than that to make these kinds of interrogations. And what I say is, in terms of the perspectival, the anthropological, human phenomenological perspective, that's very clear in the Quran. That is what is intended. You know, that there's two recipients of the Quran, the human beings and jinn. So it's going to be from the human perspective. It's not going to be from a transcendental, godly perspective that he can see every little thing. That's not what it's meant to be. It's meant to be a thing. Another thing is this: the point of Origin of Alexandria. What I'm saying is, the hermeneutical principle is problematic because if you say here's the question, and I asked this to many people that I'm sure you would respect, who are Christian scholars in their own right. I said, where do we decide to stop allegorizing, start allegorizing? So now the hermeneutical principle, where do we decide this is where it starts, this is where it stops? What I'm saying is, by the way, you said that I said that the Quran is allegorizing, I allegorize it. No, I don't allegorize anything in the Quran when it refers to a natural nature phenomenon.
Okay, so
you see the point?
So let me reply to that. You said that I was guilty of the genetic fallacy.
Yes.
And then you said that Ignatius was an apologist.
No, Justin
Martyr. Justin Martyr was an apologist, but Justin Martyr was also a bishop.
Yeah, okay.
Are you the equivalent of a bishop? Are you like an ulama? No, it does matter. Because the thing is, you're saying this as an apologist, right? And you're saying this, but you're not an ulama.
Yeah, but I'm quoting them.
Right. So here's the thing.
Alim is a singular.
In terms of the prima facie statements of the Quran, there are many that simply contradict reality. And the only way you can get around that, the only way that you can get around that is to make the Quran say things it doesn't say.
No, but
which is what you've done.
Can I say something?
All the way through this discussion. So that was the first point. The second point, unfortunately, this guy started screaming in my ear, so I'm not sure I remembered what you were saying. Where does the allegorical start and stop? Right, now that is done within the council of the church fathers. So what you do...
Of which Origin is not one.
Well, exactly. So your entire argument was built on someone that isn't even a church father. Let me finish. It is the full scope of the teaching of the church fathers. Think of them like a shura, think of them like a council. You compare all their writings together, and where they sort of focus in on.
Are you talking about ecumenical councils?
No. I'm talking about reading the church fathers as a whole, and where they come to a consensus. This is literal. This is metaphorical. It falls within a spectrum, and it's the church fathers themselves in the reading of them whole that decides for us what is and what isn't. And there'll always be some that fall out of the lines this way and fall out of the lines that way.
What I'm saying to you is that the Islamic perspective, like for example on the muddy spring thing, what we are not trying. Why I quote classical authorities from the 3rd, 4th, 5th century is to show you that the understanding of people who are not influenced by modern discourses was not put in. It couldn't have been because we're talking about someone in the 4th century. So for example, in the case of the round earth, I quoted Ibn Munada, right? So who is one of the students of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So we're talking about 250 or something, right? So he's a literalist, if anything.
Yeah.
He would be the equivalent of, I don't know who's a literalist, but maybe
A biblical fundamentalist.
yeah, maybe something like that, right? So he's that. So when you put it from that perspective, what I'm saying is, so therefore he couldn't have, like for instance, you know the issue of the the sun. There's one Shadh reading of Ibn Abbas, who's a companion of the Prophet, who put on top of the verse of chapter number 36, verse number 40, وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرٍ لَهَا ذَلِكَ تَقْدِيرُ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَكِيمِ. The sun runs to a course. He reads that وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لَا مُسْتَقَرَّ لَهَا. And he puts that in his like tafsir, his exegesis.
Yeah.
The sun runs without a place of setting.
Yeah.
So he's now into exegeting. This man was praised by the Prophet himself. He was praised, he was taught. So it's unlikely that he's going to be trying to make the Quran say something it doesn't say. Do you see what I'm saying?
You know that there are hadiths where Muhammad repeats the claim that the earth sets in a puddle of mud outside of the Quran.
Those hadiths are weak.
Hassan. Not
According to
Da'if,
whom?
they're Hassan.
No, they're weak.
No, wait, this is the point. I believe they're Hassan. I've seen them as Hassan.
Why is it Hassan?
Well, that you talk to your Islamic scholars. I just see.
No.
No, one second. All I see is how Muslim scholars call it. Some Muslim scholars call it Hassan. You're obviously quoting some scholars say Da'if. I'll have to get you next week. One second. One second.
No, I do give it to you. There's some that say it's Hassan.
Thanks. So I'm not lying.
No, you're not.
Thank you.
No.
So my point is, there are hadiths that are Hassan, right? And just for those that don't know, what is Hassan?
So there's the difference between Da'if and Hassan. Da'if is weak.
Yes, I know. Hassan.
Then you have another grade which is right above it. It's called Hassan al-Ghayrihi, which is Hassan because of another hadith.
Yeah.
So there may be 2 weak hadiths that make a Hassan al-Ghayrihi.
Yeah.
And then, but Hassan now is depending on which scholar. Because At-Tirmidhi, who wrote Jama' At-Tirmidhi.
All I'm asking is, what is Hassan? Just give us the short.
It's referred to as good.
Good.
It's not authentic. Sahih is authentic.
Yeah, I know authentic.
Yeah.
And then there's a level above Sahih.
Yeah.
So my point is that there are hadiths that are Hassan. I've seen them labeled Hassan on Islamic websites.
Exactly.
Right? I'm not in the habit of lying about these things, Hijab. Because I know you'll get blown up if you do. You gotta be clear about stuff.
Of course.
So what we've got is hadiths that are considered Hassan by some scholars, and that takes us into a whole other problem about hadiths, where Muhammad repeats the claim that the sun sets in a puddle of mud, and that is outside of the Quran. So it's clear that there is evidence that early Muslims believe that their prophet believed that the sun set in a puddle
No, but the
of
thing
mud.
is, if that was true, we should see that the early exegetes, like Tabari, Ibn Kathir is not that early, but he's like somewhere in the 8th century AH. And those literalists, they should have taken that view because they didn't really care about science. For instance, Qurtubi, who's an Andalusian scholar, he argues the earth is flat. Because of he used the Quran to argue the earth is flat.
Okay.
Right. So he says that it's, for example, Mad al-Ard. Not what he didn't use what you used, by the way. He didn't use the Mahd because that's not. He used.
Yeah, I've got the ones. I've got to find the ones with the carpet.
No, the carpet one is not a good one to use because it's not the one that the Islamic scholars use.
Well, all right.
I'll tell you which one.
Yeah, tell me the best one, and I'll come back and I'll use that.
No, the thing is, what I'm saying is.
No. I'm curious now. Go on. Tell us the best
he uses chapter 13, verse 2.
Chapter 13, verse 2.
Yeah. He doesn't use Mahd. Mahd is a weak. What you were saying was kind of weak.
Yeah, go on.
Al-Qurtubi mentions Mad al-Ard. He stretched the earth.
Yeah.
He says stretched it. That indicates the flatness of it.
Right.
Right. So what I'm saying is that these scholars, they didn't care about scientific, like let's say we're apologists or whatever.
I'm listening.
He didn't give a damn like that. So Al-Qurtubi would mention this kind of thing. You got it, yeah?
I'm
Use
looking
that.
for it. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, on the literal interpretation, there are 2 interpretations. There's one which says it's round and one that says it's flat.
So we agree that there are scholars that don't use literal interpretation.
Say again?
So there are scholars in Islam that are not using literal interpretation.
On naturalistic phenomena.
Yeah.
No.
I'll tell you.
No, there isn't.
So all Muslim scholars
so
are
let me
using
tell you, right?
literal.
Well, on the naturalistic stuff,
Yeah.
practically all of them.
Okay.
So we'll talk about the Ash'ari school,
Yeah.
the Athari school,
Yeah.
and the Maturidi school, and the Mu'tazili school.
Yeah.
So even someone like Az-Zamakhshari, who was a Mu'tazilite, he would see all of those things as literal.
Yeah.
The only ones who didn't were the falasifa. The falasifa.
Yeah.
The philosophers.
Yeah.
But they're not.
Like Ghazali.
No, Ghazali was Ash'ari.
Okay. Fair enough.
A philosopher like Ibn Sina Avicenna,
Yeah.
Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi.
Yeah.
They didn't. So, for example, Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi, and Avicenna, they didn't believe in even the Day of Judgment was going to be physical.
So I mean, day hijab. It would be nice for me and you to sit down in a place without the crowds.
Yes.
You know, and to have a proper conversation. Because I much prefer this than the shouting matches. To be honest,
I do as well.
I can do, as you know, I can do shouting matches all day.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, right. But ultimately, it just becomes too confrontational. This kind of discourse is good. What I'm going to leave you because
I've got one question for you, though.
Let me make one point.
A curious point.
Let me make one point. But what you're going to see is, in the course of our calm conversation, you undid your arguments against the Christian faith. Well, people will make their own judgment.
Yeah, of course.
But I think that in the course of our calm conversation, you actually undermined all the arguments you made.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think I just clarified what I thought was true.
Yeah.
But let me tell you something, right?
Okay. What was your question?
My question was this. You know, you stated that the church fathers.
Yeah.
Tell me if you didn't state it like this, no problem. But you stated that the church fathers, okay, that they had this allegorized understanding of, for example, they didn't exegete Genesis in a literal way.
Yeah.
So who are you referring to in particular?
Augustine. He would be a perfect example. He actually draws out all of the, if you take it literally, all of the obvious prima facie contradictions.
In what book are we talking about?
I'll have to look it up.
Because there's two that I've read. I'll tell you what I've read. Let me explain. There's two. I've read Against the Manichaeans and I've read a literal interpretation. By the way, a literal interpretation is going to be hard for you to access. It's not easily, you can't get it on PDF.
Yeah.
I had to go around to get that book.
Yeah.
I actually had to go around to get that book. And so, I read it. Here's my conclusion.
So just let me give you
I don't think he does actually allegorize it.
Augustine, all the church fathers use allegory.
I know, but what I'm saying is Genesis account.
Allegory is the most consistent use of scripture in the church fathers.
Fine, but what I'm saying is, we're talking about, for example, Genesis narrative, right?
Yeah.
No,
even
what you said, Augustine.
all of the Old Testament, they do it throughout the entirety of the Old Testament.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is,
in the New Testament.
But Augustine, when I read his books, when I read his exegesis on it, he doesn't seem to allegorize it at all. There's no indication of that.
In my reading of Augustine, he definitely
he refused Alexander's school.
Yeah, he does, because he thinks they think they go too far.
Yes.
But he definitely argues against the idea.
Can I tell you what he says?
It definitely argues against the idea of reading Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 literally. He basically points out, if you read it literally, they contradict one another. And that's the argument that you were making.
Yes, I know.
So you were insisting upon a reading that is alien to Christianity.
No, but Augustine does say that. He problematizes it, but he doesn't say, therefore, we should allegorize it.
Okay, we'll have to look it up and see exactly
for sure.
What he says.
But what I'm saying is...
But he doesn't argue for a literal
let me, can I just tell you what I read and tell me what you think, yeah? So I read John of Chrysostom, yeah? Is that how I pronounce his name? Chrysostom, yeah? He had an exegesis of Genesis. Origen had an exegesis of Genesis. Augustine had an exegesis. Not all of them had it.
Yeah.
The one Origen had was more homiletic.
Yeah.
It wasn't intended to be like. Augustine was not trying to. It's not homily. He was trying to be scrupulous and scholarly, right? Yeah. And he's two different things. So these are the three main ones I've read. I know other church fathers have commented on it, but haven't written or spoken. For example, preaching. From that, what I saw was that Origen was an outcast, really, from that perspective. So what I'm saying is, here's why I don't think it's actually a point where using him is a problem. I say, because if you use him, okay, what I'm saying is you said he's not normative, right? From your understanding.
Yeah, he's not. He's an ecclesiastical.
Right. I know he's an ecclesiastical. Right? They have put him in because of the Origen crisis, right? You know what the Origen crisis is?
Yeah, it came in the 5th century.
Yes. So what I'm saying is
and I think it was harsh and unfair.
Yeah. Most people do. Most scholars that I've read, and that's why I'm surprised with you kind of like degrading him a little bit. He seemed to be a very intelligent man, to be honest with you.
He was.
He seemed to be a man of truth. Do you know when I was?
Committed to truth. But 1 second, because
one thing I read from him. That, do you know what?
I'm going to try and help you be a better apologist, because you quote Origin.
Well, I think we're both sharpening ourselves.
Yeah, you quote Origin a lot, right? And the thing is, there's no doubt that in terms of church history, he was the first Christian writer of great scope.
Yeah, I mean the most voluminous.
Yeah, he was exactly voluminous. He was. His mind was willing to touch everything. But the thing is, just because he was the first in great scope doesn't mean that he was the sharpest or the best.
Okay, yeah.
The thing is, Origin, if you look at First Principles and study it carefully, you can actually spot where he goes off the rails in his thinking.
Yeah, I know.
You can trace
when he
out.
talks about the sun and the moon being is it animate or inanimate?
Oh, bro, yeah, it's even. I think it's even a bit before that. But the thing is as you trace out his thinking, you can see it: orthodoxy. Yeah. Oh crap! And then he just goes off the rails because he makes one logical mistake. And it's about the material, it's about the attributes of God, which is inside
him. I've read it.
Yeah.
Let me make one point.
It was the idea about the eternal creator, which is something you have in Islam, and an eternal creator means an eternal creation.
But let me say one more thing.
Eternal material.
Do you know one thing he said that I read that actually made me really like him?
Something, God, this would be great.
Honestly, do you know what he said? He was talking about, this is in his book, First Principles. I read the whole thing.
Yeah.
And to the back of it, he was talking about these things that I was talking to you about in Butterworth's translation, and he said, we need to, this is what he said, and I was so taken aback by it. And I changed my mind on all the church fathers after I read that statement.
I know what you like as a salesman, Hijab, so let's cut the salesmanship.
He said this,
come to the point.
He goes, we need to look at the words of the Bible carefully to discern which of it is from God and which of it is from man.
Yeah.
And I think this guy's sincere.
And this is one of the reasons why he would be considered an ecclesiastical writer as opposed to a church father. Because the orthodox Christian position is every part of the Bible is the word of God, and every part of the Bible is the word of man. That is exactly what we believe about the Bible. That it is
but you don't believe in
Spirit, God's Spirit. No, you see, you've got to listen to me.
I'm listening, yeah.
So the Holy Spirit has inspired every word that man has written in the Bible.
But even the mistakes.
Now, in terms of the inerrancy, right, because you didn't listen when I said it in the debate, so I'll say it to you now. I believe that every part of the Bible is true. Did you hear that? Every part of the Bible is true, properly understood. Which means that those parts that are not meant to be read literally, you don't read them literally. Those parts that are meant to be read literally, you do read them literally. And even on the literal bits, let's just be clear, like, even on the literal bits, when you consider the fact that the Bible is a written account of people's behavior, it's not going to be as, say, perfect as a camera movie of the same events. It will always miss out details. There'll always be room to fit something else in. So when I invite you to the Christian faith, and I do invite you to the Christian faith.
Well, that's the first time you said that.
Well, I'm inviting you.
Oh, you're attacking us all the time.
So I'm inviting you to the Christian faith. I'm not inviting you to believe something like Islam. I'm inviting you to believe something better than Islam.
I understand what you're saying, but let me tell you something, right? You know, you said truth. In philosophy, there's different definitions of truth.
Yeah.
So there's, for example, the consistency, coherentism.
Yeah.
There's correspondence theory, which just seems to be the most popular understanding. And then you have pragmatism and different types of. Now, from what I understood, from what you've said, is that the truth of the Bible is not necessarily from a correspondence theory perspective, in the sense that when we say correspondence theory, Bertrand Russell mentions in his book Problems of Philosophy, and others have agreed with him, and this is probably the most popular theory, that, say for example, truth is that which corresponds with objective reality.
Yeah.
Okay? Whereas coherentism, it doesn't have to be correspondent with objective reality, so long as it's internally consistent.
Yeah.
So it's coherent. Right?
Yeah.
Here's my only issue with it. You know, with the philosophical understandings of truth, whether we're talking about pragmatism or coherentism or correspondence theory, it would seem like the Bible doesn't fit into any of them. And say why? Because let's say it's not correspondence, yeah? So I accept. We don't accept truth as correspondence for the sake of argument. It has to be read on its terms. I understand what you're saying. We're saying it has to be correspondence. We do believe in it, right? And you're basically saying that you can't apply that standard on us. And I say, okay, fine, accept it. Let's take a coherentism understanding. That so long as it's internally coherent. The problem is, what is there? What use is there of metaphors which contradict each other? Like, for example, if you have a metaphor, like if I speak about the difference between validity and soundness of an argument, is that validity could talk about something which is coherent but not actually in objective reality. So if I say, for example, a unicorn done XYZ, that's a coherent story. If I say a tall short man or a black and white at the same time, or a tall short man or a squared circle, that goes against every definition of truth. What I'm saying is, for example, in the Bible, in Genesis, when it
might surprise you, but I do understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So in Genesis, when it talks about, for example, that the plants were made on the third day, and on in chapter 2 it says no plant has sprung up yet. Even if we take this as allegorical, the issue is it's not coherent. So even if we wanted to take a different understanding of truth, it still fails that.
So let me reply, because you've actually raised what is a very good question. Which, to be fair, to be fair, is the first time I think I've ever heard you raise a good question, which is, what is the point of metaphors that contradict one another?
Yes.
This is something that is widely discussed in Christian spirituality, because Christian theologians are obviously aware that there are metaphors, even in Jesus' parables, that are in contradiction. The idea of being a slave, the idea of being a son. How can you be the son and the slave of your father? That's a contradictionary metaphor. And Christians understand the idea of contradictory metaphor in terms of praxis. The idea is that you are meant to live in the middle of these two contradictory metaphors, not embracing one to the neglect of the other, not embracing 50 from one and 50 from other to make 100, but embracing both 100% simultaneously. So the idea of using the son and the slave idea. God is my father. I see myself as adopted into the family of God. But God is also a king. He also rules and owns me. He created me. And so I must act as a son and as a subject at exactly and identically the same time.
That's a good answer. Right. Let me tell you why it's a good answer, right? It's a good answer if I would accept that, if you said that all the biblical kind of direction to the end user was what to do with their own lives.
You made multiple points. Let me reply.
No, just let me get to this point. Let me tell you something. Right?
No. Wait.
Please, before it comes to my head, man.
Hijab.
All right, go on.
No, right. I also want to point out to you something. That the purpose of the Bible in the Christian faith is very different from the purpose of the Quran in the Islamic faith. The purpose of the Quran is the nascent proto-genesis of Sharia. It is the basis, the framework, the scaffolding upon which the Hadith put the layers. Am I being unfair?
Yeah, that's fine.
No, that's fair, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, but the point of the Bible...
But that's not the only point.
The point of the Bible is that it is the means by which we understand God and ourselves in the world, the narrative by which we live our lives.
Right, I understand. Well, here's the issue, right? So we have two types of injunctions, let's say, or types of sentences in the Quran, for the sake of, or in any speech. We have sentences which are either commands to people, telling them what to do, right? And you have what you call khabar, or narratives. Now, I understand even if what you said is a little bit far-fetched, that praxis and you have to live between the two metaphors, I accept for the sake of argument. The issue here is, when it comes to statements about history, okay, when we're talking about narrative, the truth of the matter is, every logician on the face of the earth will tell you that two contradictory things is a meaningless statement. It doesn't exist. It's not real. It's worse than myth. There's no nature in which, or there's no possible world in which what you're saying makes sense.
No, you misunderstand.
So just on this point, right?
You misunderstand.
The idea, if God is telling me that the plants were created on the third day, in Genesis 1:12, whatever it was, and then in Genesis 2:5, he's saying no plant has sprung up yet. He's not telling us to be anything here. So you said hold on. He's not telling us to be anything here. He's not telling us to be between two praxis or nothing. He's just saying two things which contradict each other, which for all intents and purposes, really, you can say is a meaningless
Okay, let me reply to
It's
that.
absurd as
Because I understand
something
what
which
you're
doesn't
saying.
exist.
But you're wrong. You're so wrong, Hijab. The point of Genesis, think about who Genesis was revealed to. It was revealed to the free slaves of Egypt. And what were they born into? Those slaves, those ignorant, barbarized slaves.
But it's meant to
When
be
they
for all of
finish,
us,
let me finish. They were born into a polytheistic society in which there was a god for the water, and a god for the sun, and a god for the land, and a god for the plants, and a god for these animals, and a god for that animals. So Genesis is telling them something. It's telling them that there is only one God and only one creator, and he is the creator of everything that is created. These Bronze Age barbarized slaves were not looking for a science lesson.
Yeah,
they
know
were
that.
looking for a theological lesson.
Can I come
One
back?
second.
Right.
And they get that in Genesis. You are repeating the same error that you made in our debate. You are assuming that because we live in a modernist scientific world,
No.
that people back in the Bronze Age were also thinking scientifically. They were not.
Okay,
And
Bob,
so a
I say
scientific,
something?
one second, a scientific criticism of Genesis is invalid.
Okay.
Because it wasn't written scientifically for a scientific
Okay,
people.
I grant you that. Here's what I said.
Thank you.
No. I grant you. Let's go with that for the sake of argument. That it's not meant as a scientific thing, right?
So a scientific criticism is invalid.
No, I don't think it is invalid. But what I'm saying is, let's take for the sake of argument that you can interpret the Bible in a way which is non-scientific. Allegorical.
You definitely can.
Allegorical.
You definitely can.
Yeah, fine, no problem. Yeah, what I'm saying is this: even on that basis, okay, if you do that, if you look at Genesis 1:12, where it says that the plants had been made on the third day, and look at Genesis 2:5,
Yes.
where it said no plant has sprung up yet.
Yeah.
Here, this particular specificity, I'm not talking about the entire, the motif or the theme of Genesis. This is contradictory. So I am left to assume that it's false. Now, even on a coherentist understanding of truth, not a correspondence understanding, I'm not saying it has to correspond with objective reality. I'm saying even on a coherentist understanding, there's no need for that to be the case. Now what I'm saying is this: the Quran, it's not saying, when it says لَوَجْدُ فِي اخْتِلَافًا, if this was from other than God, they would have found in it many contradictions. What it's saying is that it's the principle of sufficient and necessary conditions. Now, the truth of the matter is, in our logical day-to-day life, we require a certain level of, there's an evidentiary bar that is required in order for us to come to a conclusion about things. If that evidentiary bar is not met, then we can't believe in those things. How can I be punished for disbelieving in contradictory statements?
So let me address that point. Because once again, you've demonstrated what all your Dawah mates do. Ali Dawah, Shamsi, I know he's not your mate. Hashim, Mansour, you all make this cartoonish characterization of Christianity and then you attack it. If you had actually taken the time to read Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, you would see that what they are communicating is different.
No,
Genesis 1 is talking about the creation of the world and everything in it. Genesis 2 is talking about man's place in the world. So it's talking about the creation from the theological perspective of the importance of mankind. So the chronology is not actually important, because the teaching theologically is different.
One
second, let me finish. You should also know that there's plenty of Christians that do harmonizations between these things. You should know that.
I know that.
But
most of them don't.
Because most of them recognize that from a literary point of view, you don't need to. Because it's buying into a modernist myth, which is this idea that we should judge ancient literature by a scientific...
So is it Ishiology?
One second. By a scientific paradigm of today. And that is ahistorical. Now, let's come back to the Quran. Because the Quran...
No, but you didn't answer what I said.
But the Quran...
Before you get there.
The Quran, as we've demonstrated in our discussion, makes statements that are factually false. They do not correspond to reality.
No, but that's what you're saying. What I'm saying is that, look, can I just come back on this, yeah? We have to understand, okay? You keep saying this. If you want to be a serious apologist, that's more than just like a propagandist. You need to kind of listen to what I'm saying a little bit here. Everyone knows that, I've just told you this, the literal interpretation of the Quran is understood by the language. what the language can facilitate.
Yeah.
For example, you mentioned alaqa, yeah? Alaqa has 3 meanings in the Arabic language. In fact, the word is used in other places in the Quran.
That's the one about the leech and
Yeah, the clinging and stuff.
yeah, the clinging.
Well, you know, it's mentioned وَلَا تَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ when it talks about when you have more than one wife. Don't go to one and leave the other one hanging, suspended.
Now that would be metaphorical, wouldn't it?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
You know, I believe in metaphor in the Quran. Right? And we're not saying we don't believe in metaphoric language. What we're saying is, when you metaphorize things which are not intended to be metaphorized, that's where the problems come. Here's what I'm saying is, going back to the metaphors that contradict each other. So are you happy to say that it's ischiology, it's myth, that Genesis is myth?
I am happy to say that a literal reading of Genesis is not what is meant to be
Right,
understood.
so is it myth?
Yeah, so long as we don't do a false equivalence, that myth means false.
No, I'm not saying
Because
that.
I believe that the mythology of Genesis
Yes, okay.
is completely true.
I know that, I know.
I believe every word of Genesis.
I know that, yeah, you're saying that. So you believe that Genesis is a myth, but you're depending on some kind of coherent understanding of truth. What I'm saying is, the problem is even a myth which contradicts itself is useless.
No.
It's meaningless.
Yeah, because you're asserting a contradiction based on a prima facie literal reading. And I keep telling you that the prima facie literal reading is not how you're supposed to read Genesis.
So, okay, you know when it said no plant has sprung up yet?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So it's talking, well, let's look at that entire chapter. Because bad dawah is taking verses out of their context.
Fine.
Right? So the Genesis story in chapter 2 is talking ultimately about the creation of man and the importance of man to creation. That man is the priest of God in creation. That he's meant to be God's representative on earth in creation, care and to cultivate. That's the story of Genesis 2.
What I would say to you though,
So the point is,
you mentioned something about modernism, right? Can I just say
one second.
Johnny, 1 second.
One second.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you assert that the Quran, when it, for instance, talks about the idea of the blood.
Yeah, but I'm saying blood is not the only thing.
Right, but the point is, that's factually false.
What are you saying? Well,
I'm saying that an embryo is not a blood clot.
No,
are you arguing that an embryo is a blood clot?
Let me tell you what I said, right? The word is alaqa.
Yes.
What does alaqa mean?
It's been translated as blood clot.
It can be translated as blood clot, but there's 3 translations.
It literally translates
I know,
in this Quran.
bro, you have to listen to what I'm saying. I've done a whole series on this, right? You can check it on Sapiens Institute. What I'm saying is this, is that one of the words I've just told you, it means to suspend. And I just gave you an example in the Quran, that وَلَا تَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ وَلَا تَمِيلُوا كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ فَتَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ. So if you have 2 wives, 3 or 4, don't go to one and then just leave the other one like that, so you leave her suspended.
So are you saying,
you're saying
that this is metaphor?
What? No, it's not metaphor. No.
So it's not metaphor.
No. You're not understanding what I'm saying.
When it says,
let him carry on. He said 3
then
points.
we made the nutfa into a clot.
Okay, good.
Is that accurate or inaccurate?
Yeah, it's accurate.
So you actually believe that an embryo is a blood clot?
No, hold on.
Coagulated blood. That's what you believe.
He just jumped on another
You're going on to another point. What I'm saying is that you're saying it's bad dawah. You've already referred to the Genesis account as a myth. I'm explaining to you.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
No,
it's not a bad thing.
Alright, let's finish now. Yeah?
We're finished.
Right, what I'm saying is, even if you understand, yeah? Oh, careful. It's gonna break, man. Bro, man, be careful, that's gonna fall and break. Yeah. There's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, "Naha an-nabiy sallallahu alaihi wasallam an ad-daman." He said that there are 2 things, 2 bloods which are prohibited. 2 bloods.
Yep.
He said at-tahal and the spleen and the lung and the liver. Yeah. Now, in Arabic language, you have to understand this, because if you don't get this, you will not improve your apologetics. That's it.
I'm happy to let other people judge.
Listen. The Prophet referred to the spleen and the liver as 2 bloods. Okay, even though there's no blood there. They're not blood. It's not blood. So what it is that the Arab custom is that you describe something by how it looks. Do you understand this?
I'm hearing you.
And this is an evidence, because the Prophet said through blood, and it wasn't actually blood, actual blood. It was the liver and the spleen. So when the Quran states it's alaqa, even the translation which says blood clot, it doesn't mean by composition, it means by aesthetic value. Do you understand this?
I hear that.
Okay, good. Now, that's what I'm saying. There's three primary meanings. One of them means that. One of them means alaqa, something which clings. Other thing means something which is like clot. Yes.
Right, let me reply to this. We're gonna have to stop. Because if you get any more microphone from you, no matter how strong you are, you're just gonna fall over and not falling into it. So the point is, the translation that we have from Muslim scholars in Saudi Arabia, they have chosen clot. They have chosen clot.
I'm not Shamsi.
They have chosen clot, right?
Wrong guy.
They have chosen clot. And that is scientifically inaccurate. Fact.
Fine. My friend is a translator of the Quran. Two of them.
One second.
You know, there's a Mohammed Hijab translation of the Quran.
Are you wanting to listen? Are you wanting to listen? So the reality is that when all you did is just make your prophet look worse, because you said that your prophet described things as blood that are not blood.
That's
in
what
the
the
hadith. So my point to you is, this is just more evidence that your prophet was not guided by God.
Thanks, but that's not what the
Bro,
evidence is.
and we're gonna stop. It's lovely to talk to you. Just to show how much I appreciated a calm conversation. If you read it or not is entirely up to you. But I want to give you a vote. Yeah?
He likes reading.
Like, not 2 pence pamphlets. That's an
What,
actual.
man? I know this also.
Have a read of that. That's my gift to you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Since you gave me a gift,
Yeah.
Khaki.
now let me give you a gift.
I will definitely take a coffee.
No, I'll give you a gift as well. This is a pen. It's a pen I like.
Fair enough, thank you very much. I accept it with gratitude. Alright, you look after yourself.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob. Well done.
It's a pray.